In the educational process of collaboration with other organizations and with the world as a whole, education is key and core to others understanding how to collaborate with us and how we intend to collaborate with them and how we learn together to collaborate better. So that means learning, and it also means unlearning. It means learning new priorities and approaches and language and interpretations and understandings. And it also means letting go of gracefully prior tendencies, biases, prejudices, values, priorities, limiting vantage points, limiting mental constructs. And we get that, and we intend to support any collaborating organizations in achieving this evolution of understanding and release of what we might term a global addiction or transcendence of a global addiction to prior dynamics of competition, of monetization, of non-collaborative efforting, and of bias or prejudice or controlling and safety strategies and victim perpetrator rescuer dynamics, those sorts of things. In that process, human beings tend to seek comfort. They tend to seek comfort in every way, whether it's comfort food or a comfortable environment or comfortable relationships or comfortable conversations that don't challenge their beliefs or their values or their history or their traditions or their cultural norms or mores. And that said, whenever you have a transformative education and you actually have grounded comprehensive learning and unlearning, you will have discomfort as a result. So this tendency for us to seek comfort is something that we do on an ongoing basis. Simultaneously, we all have many subconscious feelings or parts that we might refer to and work with or discuss that say, well, I feel good about this, but I feel bad about that. I like this, but I don't like that. I think this is good, and I don't think that's good. Or I like a little bit of this, and I don't like that at all. So that internal fragmented dynamic of all of these subconscious parts operating out of sync with each other generates a challenge when it comes to making decisions in life and when it comes to learning anything in a constructive, peaceful, receptive way. Anything that we've previously recorded in our systems and called knowledge or understanding or wisdom or a belief is literally a potential learning disability that we can become attached to and we can be adverse to letting go. So in our process of helping the species and each nation and organizations release their historical preferences, their historical beliefs, their historical tendencies and habits, and embracing a new life process that is wholesome, healthy, constructive, functional, sustainable. We must understand that they are going to want to seek comfort constantly, that that's a priority in their lives, and that comfort seeking itself is not supportive directly of generating a sustainable life process for humanity. If we're going to generate a sustainable life process for humanity, there's going to be discomfort, there's going to be stress, there's going to be fear, there's going to be worry, anxiety, there's going to be judgmental dynamics, because those are all reactions to fundamental change in one's life or in any nation's process or any culture's process. And so the realization or the recognition that any one of our subconscious parts can go into a negative feeling about any information it receives or the delivery system of the information. So for example, and I apologize, my mode of communication may be uncomfortable for people, and I'm sorry for that. I try to minimize that discomfort, That said, any part of your system that would receive any word I say, the timing, the cadence, my voice tone, the type of information that you're receiving, if you have any attachment or aversion to that, does it, we're not suggesting submitting, that's not what this is about. If you have any attachment or aversion to any information that you receive in any dimension of your life, does it make sense that that in and of itself constitutes some degree of learning disability, some degree of non receptivity to that which you're hearing or perceiving or seeing? So these parts, reactions, actually shift us out of a vantage point and dynamic of unconditional love and receptivity and capacity to empathetically understand another, so much so that we become incapable of learning fully, comprehensively who they are, why they feel what they feel, why they think what they think. And then that keeps us uh, from being in rapport with them in such a way as to constructively collaborate and to work together towards a common, positive, wholesome, healthy goal. So there are, if you could imagine these parts of your system as like thousands of soap bubbles. If you saw other people as a giant stack of soap bubbles in the shape of a human being, and all of these different parts are different vantage points, positionalities, beliefs, emotional vantage points, conditioned in patterns or habits. And these beliefs or positionalities or emotional vantage points or lenses or parts, however we would choose to refer to them, they operate in compartmentalized ways, which some people would look at as empowering. Meaning, for example, men are often, at least traditionally in the past, have been taught to disassociate from their emotions, to operate from either rationality or logic or mental process or cognitive dynamics, and thus not have that process, in air quotes, interrupted by emotion. And the flip side of that, tribally, traditionally, women have been conditioned, and it's been modeled that they be in touch with all of these emotions within their systems, understand and interpret relationship dynamics and life situations in this far more multidimensional way, from emotionally and more holistically and intuitively. And and so that can generate a more complex internal information processing dynamic for women than for men, and a discontinuity of ability to understand each other's life process and to validate it and embrace it and care about it uh, and be gently supportive and nurturing towards each other's process, because it's kind of like looking at the world from two different, significantly different vantage points. If you look through one end of a telescope, you see everything that's far away is magnified and much closer. If you look through the other end of the telescope, everything seems far away and distant. Nothing has changed, and the view has changed significantly simply by which end of the telescope you choose to view the world. So, if there was a way to take all of those soap bubbles or those parts or those energy constructs or those recordings of simulacra in your systems and integrate them all into one, does it make sense that then you would feel more whole and more contiguous or more integrated as a human being? You would recognize yourself instantly as, yes, I am a mental entity. I'm also a spiritual entity. I'm also a soul. I'm an emotional and biological entity, all at the same time. And I'm okay with being all that I am, all at the same time, in every venue of life, in every conversation, in every communication. So, one example of how these parts can get into conflicts for all of you who are parents, if you on the left side of the screen, you can see that there could be five different, very intensely emotional and energetic parts. We can say, I want to be there for my kids. And I'm so stressed by life that I feel depressed and I just want to die. And I don't want to fail as a parent or as a man or a woman. And I also want to evolve and become the highest soul process that I can. Does it make sense that these drives, these underlying motivational energies, are not integrated? They're compartmentalized, they're separate, they can be significantly at odds with each other. What do you do when you're a parent and you feel stressed or depressed or like you can't keep going? And that feeling meets up with, I don't want to fail as a mother, or I don't want to fail as a father. I don't want to fail as a human being. Or I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there as a whole soul, a whole person, a whole parent. And I've got these intense stress emotions that I can't just compartmentalize and push off to the side because they're so intense. Does it make sense that these dynamics, in a way of operating from these compartmentalized, separate sub-self, sub-personality components, in a way is both a learning disability and a tribal and individual addiction and a family habit addiction? We would suggest that all of these parts, as and this whole dynamic we're describing, as they're seen in the middle of the screen, are dynamics potentially they can lead to self-judgment or self-criticism or self-punishment or self-emotional abandonment, as well as judgment of others and criticism of others, and that is a dynamic of addiction too. And so the judgment of self and other magnifies the tendency to operate in these fragmented ways. It kind of validates the seeming relevance or importance or necessity of interacting and meeting and speaking and relating from these vantage points. So, and just to give people their due, so to speak, these days, thank heaven, men are far more self-aware emotionally and relationally than in the past, and women uh, are respected more and treated better. At least it's understood that that's the path that we need to tread, even though it's not always fulfilled on. Uh, than in the past, at least in this area of the world, it's important that men understand themselves as whole beings, as emotional beings, as soul beings, as their feminine and masculine sides simultaneously in a balanced, integrated, and harmonious and whole way. Simultaneously, it's important that women be recognized and respected for every thought and every feeling, every intuition, every nuance of emotional process as being valid, on the part of men and on the part of other women and on the part of society. So these are evolutions of consciousness that we're all working through together. And the last portion of this diagram would be the bottom left statement. The 12-step program for breaking addictions, we would suggest, is a reference point for getting through some of these dynamics of addiction to traditional tribal dynamics, egoic dynamics, unconscious fragmented belief systems, or recordings of old experiences that are as of yet not brought to consciousness, that we tend to refer to or reflect upon and operate from as if they were the present moment. Meaning we tend to project onto ourselves and others and our relationships from all of these parts without realizing that we're projecting. And then we see our projection and we're assuming that that's who we're talking to. If we project onto another person prejudice or bias or better thanness or less thanness or difference or separation, then how are we going to experience them? If we see them as acceptable, lovable, as whole, as pure, as good, as excellent, as a miracle, as an expression of God in every moment, as for their child selves and for their soul selves and their adult selves, in all the different expressions and dimensions of their being that they present with. If we see all of that all at the same time, can we meet them as a whole person ourselves? And can we perceive them as the whole being that they are? And thereby more fully learn from them and them from us.